Stansbury from New Mexico.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. I am really excited to talk about electrification of our vehicle sector because, as we know, it's crucial to decarbonizing our economy and addressing the global climate crisis. So I really welcome the opportunity to talk about these issues today in this hearing. I do want to address some of the disinformation that has been provided in this hearing, but I do want to say a few things about why it's important that we electrify the transportation sector. First of all, here in the United States, almost 30% of our emissions are due to the transportation sector. And in order to address those emissions, really the real enemy here is carbon going into the atmosphere. That's what causes global climate change. And so in order to do that, we're going to have to address it through a series of interventions. That includes electrification of the transportation sector or other technologies as they developed, partnerships, of course, with the auto industry. We're going to have to, of course, modernize our electric infrastructure to be able to do this and provide support for families so that it's affordable. And that is exactly what we have done with the passage of 3 significant pieces of legislation in the last Congress. The CHIPS Act, which of course helps to support the innovation of American manufacturing, bring jobs back home, and help to build the power systems and R&D that will drive innovation in the transportation sector. The bipartisan infrastructure law that's investing in our grid and in the electrification of our transportation sector, and of course the IRA, which helps to subsidize and provide tax incentives to help voluntarily move both industry, our utilities, our co-ops, and our consumers towards this electrification. So we are already way underway of this transition, and I really take offense at the characterization that somehow this is like forcing it upon consumers and the American economy, because this is the direction that things are headed. And whether or not my colleagues across the aisle want to believe it, the auto industry is already headed that way. They are already planning their fleets out a decade and have already made commitments to move towards electrification. So whether or not you like it, whether or not you support it politically, it's happening. And whether or not you want to drive an electric vehicle, I guarantee that you are very likely to be driving an electric vehicle in the next several decades, whether you want to or not, because that is just where the industry is going. So I just wanted to be clear about that. But, you know, let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why it's important to make this transition. Ms. Baker, Brandstetter, we really appreciate you being here and your expertise on these issues. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of emissions controls and this particular EPA rule that we're discussing today and helping us to get to our carbon reduction goals through this process?
Thank you. So as was said earlier, the light duty and medium duty vehicle standards will be reducing carbon pollution by 56% by 2032, which is tremendous. I also want to point out that there is a wait list currently for many electric vehicles. So there is very high demand as these vehicles are being produced and as more options are coming online.
And I noted in your written testimony that you laid out many of the areas that the 3 bills that I just mentioned are helping to address the transition in the vehicle sector and the various subsidies and supports. Could you talk a little bit about what exactly do the infrastructure, CHIPS, and IRA do to help advance this transition, which is occurring?
So what they're trying to do together, working together, is really build a domestic supply chain from the components and critical minerals to assembly, and then supporting the purchase of these vehicles by American consumers. And so there's support for building new facilities to convert from ICE vehicles or hybrids to either fuel cell or battery electric vehicles. And we're also seeing the new used vehicle tax credit, which will help make it more affordable for low and moderate income households as there are more used vehicles available in the market. We're also seeing the build out of charging infrastructure has been mentioned earlier as well.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that. In New Mexico, which is a very rural state, that infrastructure is going to be vital, and it also goes hand in hand with the electrification transition that our utilities are undertaking to bring renewables online, because it also helps to stabilize as our grid as well. So all around, this is a transition that is happening. The U.S. government has passed legislation to help support it. Finally, I've run out of time, but I think in a later round, I'll address some of the other issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Edwards from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard my colleague from the other side of the aisle